Chapter 1756. On this short flight of stairs, Gu Xingyin was blocked several times. Those ghosts did not seem to want them to go upstairs at all. Although Gu Xingyin was a little nervous, the hope in her heart grew. In her opinion, the more these ghosts behaved like this, the more likely there was something incredible upstairs. Finally, they stepped onto the last step of the second floor. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief. She looked sideways at the long and old corridor. With just one look, her heart sank. At the end of the corridor, an old lady with a face full of wrinkles was looking at them expressionlessly. This old lady did not have a ghostly aura. She was wearing a long black dress, and her expression was harsh and strict. She looked like an old madam from a wealthy family in ancient dramas. However, she appeared in a place like this, and dressed like this. Even if Gu Xingyin believed that she was not a ghost, she could not do it. The only explanation was that this old lady, who did not have a hint of ghostly aura, was a ghost that was scarier than the ghosts downstairs. This realization made Gu Xingyin shudder. The other people also looked at the old lady with vigilance. The next moment, they were shocked to find that the old lady, who was standing far away at the end of the corridor, had appeared in front of them. Gu Xingyin felt a chill in her heart. Although the ghosts downstairs appeared and disappeared mysteriously, she could still see their movements. However, even with her psychic eye, she could not see the old lady's movements clearly. It was as if she had really teleported here. The only hope now was that the talisman given by the system would be effective on her. Fortunately, the old lady only came to their side, but did not touch them directly. The system said confidently, "Host, please rest assured. The Guanyin soul-subduing talisman produced by the system is of absolute quality. Not to mention a ghost of this level, even a ghost king would not be able to break it." All right. Gu Xingyin sighed in relief. A reprieve was more hopeful than a direct death sentence. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the old lady's complexion was green. It was not the color of a living person's skin. Looking down, he could see spots of yellow livor mortis on the back of her shriveled hand. However, compared to the group of ghosts downstairs, the old lady's appearance was much more normal. Moreover, she didn't seem to have much of an appetite for them. Yes, appetite. Gu Xingyin thought about the way the female statue and the other ghosts looked at them. It was as if they were drooling over delicious food. It was very uncomfortable to look at them. However, this old lady was different. The way she looked at him was not like she was looking at food, but like she was looking at a stranger who had disturbed her. There was only disgust. The old lady stood some distance away from the crowd, and actually began to speak. Her voice was like an old tree bark that had been dried up for countless years. When it was swept up by the north wind, it let out a hoarse and painful cry, making people who heard it couldn't help but have goosebumps. "Humans, this is not a place for you to come. Get down." She spoke slowly, but clearly. This old lady seemed to still retain a relatively clear consciousness. However, her words were somewhat unacceptable to the crowd. Get down? Who didn't know that there was a group of malicious ghosts waiting for them downstairs? Going down to die. Chapter 1757. Gu Xingyin said calmly. It was an accident that we came to this place. We also want to leave this castle very much. Do you have any way to get us out of here? As soon as she asked, the rest of the people also pricked up their ears. What if they were lucky enough to meet a kind-hearted ghost who didn't like to eat people and sent them out? Then they heard the old woman's cold voice. Every 10 days, there will be an alternation between the living and the dead in this castle. That is also the only time when living people can come in. Since you are unlucky enough to come here, don't think about getting out before the next alternation between the living and the dead. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they heard that. At the same time, they admired Gu Xingyin more and more in their hearts. It was just as she had predicted. They would have to stay in this place for at least 10 days before they could get out. Seeing that the old woman didn't seem to have any intention of being enemies with them, Zhang Chao mustered up his courage and said, "Madam, can we borrow your place and stay for a few days? After 9 days, we will get out." The old woman slowly turned her head to look at Zhang Chao. Everyone was almost in a circle, and Zhang Chao happened to be in the opposite direction of Gu Xingyin. Everyone saw that her body didn't move, but her head seemed to turn in a circle and look straight at Zhang Chao. This strange scene caused Zhang Chao to shiver. It was too creepy. The old woman's voice suddenly became sharp. No. Living people are not allowed to enter here. You must leave immediately, leave this place. Gu Xingyin said. There are countless malicious ghosts who want our lives. We can't go down to die. The old woman suddenly laughed strangely, and extremely sharp fingernails suddenly grew out of her hands. Looking at everyone coldly, the old woman's eyes flashed with a strange light. Do you think that I won't kill you if you stay on the second floor? Seeing the old woman's appearance, she frowned. This development was not right. If this old woman on the second floor, who was obviously more powerful, also knew how to kill, how did Qin Qingqing survive? Gu Xingyin felt a little confused. It wasn't a good feeling to think that you had found hope, only to have reality give you a cold slap. She forced herself to calm down. There must be something wrong. There must be a way. Gu Xingyin tried to reason with the old woman. We don't mean any harm, and we won't disturb your life. We just want to find a place to stay for a while. Why can't you tolerate us? However, the old woman couldn't listen to him at all. She just coldly told them to scram. Gu Xingyin simply ignored her. She said to her companions behind her, It seems that my guess is wrong. The second floor doesn't give us any hope. She sounded apologetic. Unexpectedly this time, Qin Qingqing was the first to comfort her. It doesn't matter. Not to mention anything else, at least compared to the dancing demons in the hall, this place isn't so unsightly. As soon as she said this, everyone couldn't help but laugh. That was true. On the entire second floor, other than the dark corridor, it seemed that the old woman was the only ghost that existed. Chapter 1758. Gu Xingyin's eyes slowly scanned the entire second floor. They were now at the top of the stairs that led up from the first floor. The stairs stopped here. Where they were, there were only a few mottled walls, and then there was a corridor that extended endlessly to the other side. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. If Qin Qingqing in the original plot ran up the stairs that they had walked up, then as a lunatic with mental problems, the most likely thing she would do was to run forward when she saw the road. There was no road here, so there was only a corridor left. Could it be that there was a secret at the end of the corridor? Gu Xingyin glanced around. The corridor was like a dim passage, and the place where the old woman first appeared was at the end of the corridor. Gu Xingyin said in a low voice, Are you willing to follow me to the end? Since this is not our destination, let's continue forward. They all expressed that there was no problem. The old woman seemed to have heard their words. She said sharply, You're not allowed to leave. Get down, get down. However, she could only scream. She tried to attack Gu Xingyin and the others, but every time, before she could touch anyone, there would be bursts of black smoke on her hand, accompanied by a burning pain. No one had been able to bring her pain for thousands of years. Seeing the old woman like this, her heart calmed down. She can't hurt us. We still have enough time. Take it slow. We'll find a way. She slowly walked towards the corridor. The old woman tried to stop them again and again, even if it meant that she would get injured again and again. Moreover, as they walked forward, the doors of the rooms in the corridor opened one by one. One by one, stiff people walked out and blocked their way expressionlessly. Qin Qingqing almost screamed. Could it be that the old woman wasn't the only ghost on the second floor? Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, scanned with her spiritual eye and found that the corridor was empty. These things were all illusions made by the old woman to stop them. All of you, close your eyes. These are all illusions. Just hold on to me and follow me. She shouted loudly. These illusions were too realistic. She was afraid that those people would take them seriously. Everyone did as they were told. Although they didn't know how Gu Xingyin knew that these were all illusions, they were already used to listening to her. Everyone walked forward slowly. Gu Xingyin looked at this dark and quiet corridor, and there were always all kinds of illusions. For example, as they walked, a chandelier suddenly fell down on their heads, as if in the next moment, they would be bleeding. Or perhaps the floor would suddenly collapse, and there would be cold knife tips below. If they fell, their intestines would be pierced through. Without the psychic eye, Gu Xingyin felt that he probably wouldn't have been able to get out of the illusion. She knew a lot about illusions. She knew that as long as one's heart was shaken, the environment would take advantage of it. In such an environment, once they fell into the illusion, this old woman probably had more than 100 ways to take their lives without touching them. Gu Xingyin ignored the old woman's disbelief and resentment. Finally, she walked to the end of the corridor without changing her expression. The moment she stepped into the end, she thought she had walked into heaven. Chapter 1759. It was just the difference between taking a step forward and taking a step back. It was like the difference between heaven and hell. Gu Xingyin stared at the scene in front of her for a long time in a daze. The others had their eyes closed. Now that they felt that Gu Xingyin suddenly stopped moving, they all felt strange and opened their eyes. Then, they couldn't help but open their mouths. What appeared in front of everyone was warm and bright light. A sparkling and translucent crystal staircase appeared under everyone's feet. On every step, the same transparent pattern was engraved, reflecting a beautiful light under the light. On both sides of the staircase, there were fresh flowers with dew, blooming in the most beautiful moment of their lives. The crystal staircase wound up, making it impossible for people to see the scene behind, but it didn't make people feel afraid. It only made people yearn for it. Who knew what kind of scenery would be at the bottom of this exquisite staircase? Qin Qingqing looked at the perfumed lily in a vase not far in front of her, and had the urge to cry. Although she had only been here for a short day, she felt as if she was a lifetime away from the normal life she had before. She couldn't help but want to reach out and touch the petals in front of her, but her arm was pulled hard by Zhang Chao. Zhang Chao frowned and looked at her. Are you crazy? You dare to believe the things in this place? Qin Qingqing recalled the scene in the hall. She suddenly shuddered and woke up from her trance. Everyone looked at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin looked carefully for a long time and finally said slowly, "No, these are not illusions." Under everyone's widened eyes, she gave a definite answer. "These are all real." Shuewan couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hand. This was really too shocking. Perhaps the scene in front of them was too shocking. For a moment, everyone didn't know what to do. They could only look at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin turned her head. She saw that the solemn and gloomy old woman was looking at them with hatred. She was standing in the shadows not far from everyone. The two sides were in two completely different worlds. One step into heaven, one step into hell. That's not a place you should go. Come out. The old woman called out to them in a hoarse voice. However, she was obviously worried about something and didn't dare to approach him. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt relieved. She thought that she had probably found the reason why Qin Qingqing was still alive. In the original plot, Qin Qingqing probably stumbled into this place by accident. She burst out laughing. This time it wasn't to pretend to be calm. Instead, it was a genuine smile of relief. She said, "Everyone let go. I think we're probably safe now." Everyone was overjoyed to hear this. Zhang Chao said hesitantly, "Leng Shi, are you sure?" Gu Xingyin said, "What I know is that those ghosts don't dare to come close to this place. As for above," she pointed at the crystal staircase and said, "I'm not sure what will be there." As she spoke, she was the first to loosen her grip. At first, everyone was very nervous, afraid that something would happen. They all gripped their weapons tightly. After a while, they realized that nothing had happened. Looking at Gu Xingyin, who sat on the stairs with a natural expression and took out a bottle of water to drink, everyone burst into cheers. They were saved. Chapter 1760. Everyone sat on the ground, and the two girls no longer looked lonely as they sat down on the ground. They slowly took out the food in their backpacks. For the first time in a day and night, they finished a meal normally. As Qin Qingqing ate, she suddenly started crying. She was still biting the bread in her mouth. As she ate, she cried. "I never knew that sitting and eating bread like this was such a blissful thing." She really didn't look good like this, but no one laughed at her. Because almost everyone's eyes turned red when they looked at Qin Qingqing. Only Gu Xingyin was still eating slowly with a calm expression. Then, she realized that everyone was looking at her. Gu Xingyin's first reaction was, did something appear behind her again? She didn't look back. She quickly rolled on the ground and left the area she was previously in. Then she looked up and saw nothing. Gu Xingyin. She looked at everyone. Why are you looking at me? The other 5 people were obviously stunned by her actions just now. They were stunned for a while before they realized that Gu Xingyin had misunderstood something. Ha 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 ha. There was a burst of laughter. They felt that they hadn't laughed so happily in a long time. Zhang Chao finally stopped laughing. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes. Leng Shi, don't misunderstand. There are no ghosts here. We just feel that we are really grateful to you along the way. If it weren't for you, we really don't know how many times we would have died. After he said this, the others couldn't help but nod. Qin Qingqing also said, thank you so much, Sister Leng Shi. I know that my personality isn't good, but under such circumstances, you didn't abandon me. I'm really grateful. The others also expressed their gratitude. Even Qingge, who had always been silent, had a stiff face and thanked Gu Xingyin. After this incident, the estrangement between them seemed to have lessened a lot. Gu Xingyin glanced at the corridor and found that the old woman had disappeared. Most likely, he knew that there was nothing he could do to them, so he left. Qin Qingqing noticed Gu Xingyin's actions and also raised her head to take a look. She suddenly stood up and walked up a few steps, keeping her gaze away from the corridor. It wasn't easy for me to relax. I don't want to see those things again, she complained. Everyone felt that this was the case. Thus, all of them went up a few steps and left the dim corridor behind. At this moment, Qin Qingqing suddenly looked up. She whispered, I don't know what's on top of it. As soon as she said this, the others also became restless. Then they all looked at Gu Xingyin. Along the way, they seemed to have gotten used to letting Gu Xingyin be their leader. Gu Xingyin was curious as well. She asked the system, do you know what's at the top of the stairs? The system shook its head very honestly. I don't know. Gu Xingyin. The system expressed that it was very innocent. The system has no way of knowing things that didn't appear in the plot. Chapter 1761. As soon as Gu Xingyin came back to her senses, she met 5 pairs of inquiring eyes. She thought for a moment and said, everyone is very tense today and should be in a rather tired state now. How about this? Let's take a rest first and have a good sleep. When we're well rested, we'll go up and explore. What do you think? The others also thought that this was a good idea. Gu Xingyin assigned them casually. Start with me, then Zhang Chao, Qin Qingqing, Qingge, and then Shuewan. You 2 decide yourselves. Each of you will guard for an hour. Rest well first, then we'll talk about other things. No matter how safe this place looked, they still had to be vigilant. Okay. The crystal steps were very spacious, and each step was more than enough for one person to sleep. Because of the peace of mind, and the heavy shackles in their hearts were removed, everyone fell asleep immediately. Gu Xingyin quietly looked at this almost illusory scene alone, and secretly prayed that there would be no more twists and turns. Time passed quickly. After everyone had slept their fill, everyone stood up energetically. Gu Xingyin still took the lead. She held a dagger in her hand and slowly walked forward. Nothing unexpected happened. There would be a turn after every 9 steps. Gu Xingyin counted every turn he took until he reached the 9th turn. Finally, there were no more spiral steps in front of him. They had reached the end. Gu Xingyin clenched the dagger in her hand and said in a low voice, everyone be careful. Everyone expressed that they understood. Then they slowly made their way to the top. What greeted their eyes was, it was a very big room. The floor of this room was covered with a thick lavender velvet carpet. On the left wall there was a huge Western-style wall clock. The room was very orderly. The people present might not be able to recognize every piece of furniture and decoration, but they could see the nobility and luxury with their eyes. It could be imagined that the owner of this room should be a person of high status who paid great attention to the quality of life. Qin Qingqing suddenly exclaimed in a small voice. Everyone followed her gaze. It turned out that there was a huge oil painting hanging on the wall on the right, probably above the main chair for receiving guests. Due to the position they occupied after ascending the stairs, They did not see this at first glance. This was a man who could easily take away everyone's breath and gaze. His long black hair was tied up high, revealing a pair of eyes that were even more mysterious and enchanting than the most beautiful amethyst. His facial features were so deep and perfect that they seemed to have been carefully sculpted. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, as if he had seen something that made him happy. Continuing to look, the person in the painting was riding on a white horse. In his hand was a longbow inlaid with gems. Obviously, he was hunting. Judging from his joyful expression, he must have hunted a decent prey. Looking at his riding attire, it was obvious that this attire was from at least a few centuries ago. It should have been a painter back then who had faithfully recorded this scene. What a beautiful person, Qin Qingqing murmured. Her eyes lit up. Compared to the people in this painting, the few male celebrities I've chased before are simply repulsive. Everyone nodded in deep agreement. Zhang Chao muttered. Maybe the painter deliberately painted him to look good in order to please this aristocrat? Today there was no electricity at Gao Lingji's place for the whole day. The previous 4 chapters were tenaciously persisted by the notebook. This is the 7th chapter. There are still 3 chapters in the evening. I didn't lie to you, right? The male lead is coming, it's not scary anymore. Hurry up and vote for Gao Lingji, who is a woman of her words. It's the end of the month. Don't waste the monthly votes. Chapter 1762. Qin Qingqing rolled her eyes at him. I don't believe that a painter from hundreds of years ago has such a good imagination. Gu Xingyin watched the two of them bicker. She silently looked at the scene in the room. This place was actually very abnormal. Not just here. In fact, it should be said that from the beginning of the crystal stairs, everything was very abnormal. There was no doubt that this was an ancient castle that had existed for hundreds or even thousands of years. Moreover, looking at the appearance of the first and second floors, it was impossible for anyone to come here. Then, how did those crystal stairs remain untouched after thousands of years? Where did those lights come from? How could there be lights hundreds of years ago? What was even more ridiculous were those flowers with dew on them. What kind of flowers could not rot after thousands of years? The situation in the room above was the same as on the stairs. The carpet was clean. The chairs and tea sets were not even a trace of dust. The oil paintings seemed to have just been hung up. All of this seemed to have been frozen in time at the most beautiful moment. The problem now was that Gu Xingyin knew that there was a problem everywhere, but she did not feel any danger. She also did not feel anything wrong. Moreover, from this room, except for the stairs below, there was no exit or door. There was only a living room and a small bathroom. There was not even a bedroom. No matter how she looked at it, it was very strange. The others were obviously not fools. However, after Gu Xingyin said it out loud, no one dared to touch anything inside even though they were elated. Gu Xingyin looked around and said, I can't see through the mystery of this. Everyone, don't touch anything inside. We'll stay here for 10 days and go out when the time is up. This was the safest way. The others nodded. They sat at the top of the crystal steps and slowly waited for time to pass. The happiest thing was that there was a bathroom. God knew how long they had been holding it in. However, they were still a little scared. Even going to the bathroom was a private matter, in pairs. No one knew what would happen if they were alone. Just like that, 3 days passed by peacefully. Everyone was already very familiar with this place, and their hearts relaxed. There was really no danger, and the velvet carpet was quite comfortable to sleep on. That night, Gu Xingyin, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly woke up in a daze. There was no night here, and the room was always as bright as day. Gu Xingyin could only confirm that it was night by looking at the time on her watch. She stood up in a daze and wanted to go to the bathroom. Unexpectedly, Qin Ge, who was sleeping in front of her, suddenly turned over, and Gu Xingyin's feet tripped over. Gu Xingyin lost his balance for a moment, and fell straight to the ground. She knocked her forehead on the mahogany coffee table in front of her. So painful. Gu Xingyin only felt a severe headache accompanied by dizziness. She could not help but groan. The others were also awakened by the commotion. Qin Ge was the first to wake up. Seeing Gu Xingyin's appearance, he hurriedly helped her up. I'm sorry Leng Shi, I didn't expect. Qingge was very embarrassed. Gu Xingyin waved her hand. She could only blame her bad luck. She did not notice that her blood stained the mahogany furniture, and actually slowly seeped into it. Chapter 1763. Gu Xingyin got herself some clean water to wipe her wound. There was no disinfectant or clean cotton balls. She could only hope that there wouldn't be any stubborn bacteria on this 1,000-year-old mahogany furniture. She felt someone shake her from behind and couldn't help but say, "Qingge, don't shake me." Qingji's inexplicable voice came out. "I didn't shake you." Gu Xingyin's heart tightened. Then not only her, but everyone else also felt the shaking. It wasn't people who were shaking but the ground. What? What is going on? Is there an earthquake? The white-collar man Li Chang said. Gu Xingyin. Even if you used your toes to think, you would know that there couldn't be such a thing as an earthquake. The ground shook so much that they could only hold hands and stick close to each other to avoid being separated. In a place they couldn't see, on the first floor, the malicious spirits that had scared the 6 of them half to death were now cowering in a corner, shivering. The entire hall was filled with the sound of ghosts howling. Those malicious spirits felt that a powerful force was slowly awakening. That power. These ghosts felt that the owner of that power could easily kill them with just a thought. A few of the more powerful ones, led by the female statue ghost, who even had a trace of consciousness, were gathered together to discuss in a low voice. This power. Could it be the legendary Duke? The old woman holding the crowbar said slowly. After she said this, a look of fear appeared on the pale faces of the ghosts. They all disappeared into the darkness. Hopefully this wasn't true? Second floor. The old woman was already kneeling on the ground, kowtowing in the direction of the stairs at the end of the corridor. She had actually lost a lot of her memories, but she had an instinctive respect and fear for this power. The only ones who were calm were the 6 people who didn't know anything. The sound of the ground shaking slowly stopped. Everything returned to normal. Qin Qingqing heaved a sigh of relief and raised her head. It finally stopped. I was worried that if this place collapsed and we fell down to the first floor. Her voice was stuck in her throat. Not only her, but everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. The earthquake just now seemed to have turned on some unknown switch. The entire room had undergone a huge change. The room that was originally surrounded by walls had a window. They could see the clear sky and white soft clouds outside. If they remembered correctly, the sky of this ancient castle had always been gray. They couldn't even see the sun. Where did the blue sky and white clouds come from? What was most inconceivable was that on the wall opposite them, several doors appeared. Doors. There was a handle made of golden copper on them. They didn't doubt that they could open the door with a slight twist. Then they saw something brand new. This. Qin Qingqing swallowed her saliva. What kind of place have we come to? No one answered her. No one could answer this question. Even Gu Xingyin didn't know. At this moment, everyone was shocked to find that the door suddenly turned. That door moved on its own without anyone else moving. There was only one explanation: there was someone on the other side of the door. Everyone held their breaths. Chapter 1764. Gu Xingyin noticed that someone had grabbed her sleeve. She didn't turn around to see who it was, because she was also nervous. The door opened quietly. A pair of black boots appeared in front of everyone. They looked up. Her long and slender legs were wrapped in tight dark-colored trousers. Above her knees, there was a purple shirt quietly hanging down. Looking up, there was a set of clothes with a very strange design. Looking up, there was a set of clothes with a very strange design. Looking up. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't because this pale-faced man had a handsome face that seemed to gather the spirit energy of heaven and earth. But everyone couldn't help but turn to look at the oil painting on the wall. This person looked exactly the same as the person in the oil painting. Did a 1,000-year-old ghost come back to life? The man's gaze swept across everyone, and then accurately stopped on Gu Xingyin. Then he slowly smiled. Qin Qingqing only felt her body heat up, and then something flowed down her nose. She subconsciously reached out to touch it. Blood. She actually had a nosebleed from looking at a man's smile. Qin Qingqing felt that she was quite useless, but this man was really beautiful. Then, Qin Qingqing only felt her eyes blur, and that extremely impactful handsome face appeared in front of her. How much of an impact would such an enlarged extreme beauty have on a person who was obsessed with looks? Qin Qingqing couldn't answer, because she felt that she was having difficulty breathing, and the nosebleed seemed to be faster. However, this beauty didn't look at her. Everyone stared blankly as this strangely handsome man blinked his eyes and appeared beside them as if he had teleported, and then, he half knelt in front of Lung Shi, and a dreamy gentle smile appeared on his face. I've finally waited for you, my bride. Everyone. What kind of strange development was this? They all looked at Gu Xingyin strangely. However, Gu Xingyin couldn't answer them, because she herself was also dumbfounded. She tried to call the system. System, can you explain? Actually, the moment the man appeared, she sensed a familiar soul aura from him. She knew that this man was her lover, but she couldn't understand what kind of script this was. Bride? Who would call someone a bride the moment they met? What if she didn't come? Would he still call someone else his bride? The system did not answer her. Then, the mysterious man tilted his head and suddenly asked in a soft voice, "Are you talking to someone, my bride?" Gu Xingyin felt a chill in his heart. This was the first time she had met someone who could sense the existence of the system. Although this man looked very mysterious, strange, and powerful, it was hard for Gu Xingyin to feel nervous when he was surrounded by the familiar lotus fragrance. She looked at the man calmly. "Who are you? I've never seen you, and I'm not your bride." "Are you sure you didn't recognize the wrong person?" The man's lips curled into a smile. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but follow him. This man was simply too good-looking. Especially when he smiled, whether it was the corners of his lips, his eyes, or the tips of his brows, they all seemed to carry a trace of indescribable charm. People couldn't help but follow and yearn for it. And fall for it. Chapter 10. Oh, today's update isn't scary, right? At the end of the chapter, there was a question asking if the female supporting lead would steal the male lead. This world wouldn't. Ha, Qin Qingqing has also grown a lot. There are no updates in the morning. Everyone, please vote after you've finished reading. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night. Chapter 1765. The man obviously noticed Gu Xingyin's gaze. She was fascinated by him. Accepting this knowledge, the man's smile became even more joyful. He reached out his fair and slender fingers and gently touched the scar on Gu Xingyin's left forehead. Gu Xingyin could feel the slight coolness of his fingers. It didn't hurt when he touched the wound. Instead, it was very comfortable. She couldn't see it, but the others could clearly see that after the mysterious man put his fingers on Lung Shi's wound and gently rubbed it twice, the wound that was originally bruised and swollen had miraculously disappeared. The man was very tall. Even if he was half kneeling, he still looked taller than the others. He bent down and stared at Gu Xingyin. "How can I mistake my bride? From the beginning to the end, there will be no one but you." The others sitting by the side. They felt that they were a little redundant standing here. Gu Xingyin tilted her head and avoided his fingers. It wasn't because she didn't like it, but because she felt the cold touch on her forehead itchy. However, the man's eyes darkened because of her avoidance. She seemed to be rejecting him. Gu Xingyin stared at him seriously and asked, "I still don't know who you are." The man glanced at her, and then glanced at the others sitting on the ground. He said in a low voice, "Get up and tidy up, my bride. You're in such a sorry state now." Gu Xingyin was embarrassed when she heard this. Lung Shi and the others came from the city to this castle. After a day and night of escaping in a sorry state, they obviously didn't look very good at the moment. If people were in a situation where they had to worry about their own safety at all times, they naturally wouldn't think more. But now, it was obvious that they were out of danger. Hearing the man's words, Gu Xingyin also felt a little uncomfortable with the sticky feeling on her body. She asked bluntly, "Do you have a bathroom and a change of clothes here? I want to take a shower." The others couldn't help but sweat for her when they heard her words. This mysterious man who suddenly appeared was obviously very powerful. They didn't even know who he was. How dare Lungshur order him around so confidently? What if she annoyed him? However, no one could understand Gu Xingyi's confidence. She knew that what they were worried about wouldn't happen. Sure enough, hearing Gu Xingyi's words, the man's expression obviously became happy. Of course. This castle has always been prepared for its mistress. He stood up first, then bent down and reached out his hand to Gu Xingyi. Gu hesitated for a moment. She wondered if she needed to be more reserved. Then, she raised her head and met the man's mysterious eyes that were as dark as violets. He had been waiting for her hand. Gu Xingyi blinked. Without much hesitation, he succumbed to her beauty. They were an old couple. To hell with being reserved. Under everyone's gaze, the mysterious man personally held Gu Xingyi's hand and walked into the room on the far left. Looking at the two of them leaving hand in hand, Qin Qingqing clutched her chest and said faintly, "I feel like I'm a little redundant." The others also nodded in agreement. Chapter 1766. To be honest, looking at the way the two of them interacted, it was impossible to tell that they had just met for the first time. Zhang Chao frowned worriedly. "Are we just going to let Lungshur leave? Will anything happen to her?" Shuewan rolled her eyes at him and said, "What are you men's eyes for? Didn't you see the way that handsome guy looked at Lungshur? It was so gentle that he wanted to give the whole world to her. Would such a person hurt Lungshur? Besides," Shuewan complained, "even if he really wants to harm Lungshur, if it's someone Lungshur can't handle, do you think it'll be of any use even if we follow?" Zhang Chao. He was speechless. In the room, Gu Xingyi followed the man in and realized that it was a huge bedroom. The room was also covered with a thick purple velvet carpet, and even the curtains were purple. Looking at the man's dark purple robe, Gu Xingyi had a certain understanding of the man's preferences. She slowly looked around the bedroom. As someone who had once owned a castle, she had a good eye and could tell that the style of this bedroom was extremely luxurious. Fortunately, the owner of the bedroom had good taste. Although it was luxurious, it didn't feel tacky at all. However, no matter how she looked at it, it didn't look like an ownerless bedroom. She raised her head and voiced her doubts. "From what I see, this bedroom doesn't look like a guest room." "Guest room?" the man asked. He smiled and shook his head. "How can my bride go to the guest room? This is my master bedroom, of course," he smiled teasingly. "This is also your master bedroom." Gu Xingyi was calm in the face of such blatant flirting. After knowing the location of the bathroom and confirming that she could use it, she mercilessly kicked him out. "I'm going to take a shower now. Get out." She didn't hesitate to ask him to leave. Since he said that this was her master bedroom, she could use her rights as the mistress. The man wasn't angry at all. He walked out of the bedroom cooperatively and closed the door for Gu Xingyi considerately. Gu Xingyi watched him walk out before she turned around and smiled. Outside the door. After he stepped out of the door, the man's expression changed instantly. In front of outsiders, he restrained his affectionate gentleness, and his expression carried a trace of indifference. "Dear guests who have come from afar, that is the guest room of the castle. There is a change of clothes inside. You can go and freshen up." As he spoke, he pointed in a certain direction. Then, following his movements, the entire wall on the other side suddenly extended out, and a magnificent corridor appeared in front of everyone. On both sides of the corridor were identical rooms. In everyone's eyes, this scene was completely like an audit. However, after experiencing what had happened on the first two floors, everyone was traumatized by the existence of the corridor. The five of them looked at each other, but no one dared to take a step forward. The man tilted his head and looked at them in confusion. He suddenly looked at Qingge, who was closest to him. Qingge felt his mind go blank. In just a moment, he felt as if everything in his mind had been seen by someone. Chapter 1767. It was at this moment that the man understood why they didn't move. He frowned slightly. If anyone who knew him was here, they would know that the Violet Duke never showed his emotions on his face. Frowning like this was already a sign of extreme anger. He was indeed angry. But not because of these people, but because of the foul atmosphere downstairs. He had only slept for a short 1,000 years, and these cats and dogs dared to come to his place and behave atrociously? What he couldn't stand most was not that they were behaving atrociously here, but because they had frightened Gu Xingyin. He was going to deal with them directly, but then an idea formed in his mind. Qingge was looking at him in horror. He could feel that in that moment, everything in his mind had been seen by the man in front of him. This was simply too terrifying. What kind of existence was he? Of course, the man couldn't answer him. He just said, "You don't have to be afraid here. In this world, no one can hurt my guests." He didn't say it loudly, but the confidence in his words was very strong. Everyone looked at each other. In the end, Qin Qingqing was the first to stand up and thank him. Then she pulled Shui Wan into the first room closest to the hall. The other 3 men looked at each other and decisively entered the same room. They definitely didn't have the courage to enter a room alone. In the whole living room, only the man was left sitting there quietly. Above his head was the painting of a white horse with a bow. Contrasting with the painting, he actually had the illusion that he had traveled through time. However, he did travel through time. At this moment he suddenly thought of something. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, and his figure instantly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in the bedroom. He gently knocked on the bathroom door, and his soft and deep voice directly entered Gu Xingyin's ears. "My beautiful bride, I think you may need my help at this moment." The bathroom was silent for a moment. Then the door was opened from the inside. Gu Xingyin stood at the door with a towel wrapped around his body. Hot steam seeped out of the bathroom. She looked at the man and didn't ask him how he knew she was thinking about him. She just said, "I didn't take the clothes, and I don't know where the clothes you prepared for me are." The man's eyes fell on her exposed shoulders, and his eyes darkened for a moment. He smiled gently and said, "Come with me." He led Gu Xingyin to a gorgeous wardrobe and pulled it open. In an instant, a pile of clothes appeared in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin could clearly see that the wardrobe was divided into 2 distinct sections from the middle. It was obvious that one section was for men, and the other for women. However, their styles were all gorgeous and flamboyant, just like the man in front of her. A beautiful wardrobe had always been a woman's favorite. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The man tilted his head and smiled at her. This wardrobe has been waiting for its mistress for thousands of years. He reached out and picked out a set of clothes for Gu Xingyin. "I'll go out first. Take your time to change," he said as he tapped Gu Xingyin's forehead. Chapter 1768. Gu Xingyin felt that something suddenly appeared in her mind. She looked at the man in front of her emotionally, as if she didn't expect him to be so considerate. The man reached out his hand to cover her eyes and whispered in her ear, "Don't look at me like that." Gu Xingyin didn't understand, and then she heard the next sentence, "I can't help it." Gu Xingyin. The trace of emotion that had just risen disappeared without a trace. She only felt a soft and cold touch on her forehead. Of course she knew what it was. Then the hand on her eyes was released, and she couldn't see the man when she looked up again. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but smile and whisper, "Why did you run away after kissing me?" The man sitting in the living room suddenly showed a helpless smile. "You can't wrong me. If I didn't run away, you might not be able to get out tonight." Gu Xingyin found that the man took out a complete set of clothes, and there were even undergarments inside. After exclaiming his thoughtfulness again, she slowly picked up the clothes and put them on one by one. That's right. The man just touched her eyebrows to tell her how to put on these clothes. After finally putting them on, Gu Xingyin looked at herself in the huge carved dressing mirror in the bedroom. At a glance she understood the man's trick, the style, the color and the material. It was exactly the same as the man's. It was really, Gu Xingyin held her forehead and laughed first. Such a strong and arrogant lover. It's really very tempting. She gently pushed the door open and walked out. The man sitting in the living room immediately looked at her. Seeing him looking at her without blinking, Gu Xingyin walked to him and turned around. "What's wrong? Don't I look good?" The next moment, her waist was held by a pair of strong arms, and she fell into the arms full of cold fragrance. The man gently buried his head in her fair and beautiful neck. He took a deep breath and murmured, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. No, it's very beautiful. So beautiful that I regret it." Gu Xingyin was a little confused. Regret? She wanted to raise her head, but the man used force on the male lead. Yes, regret. Such a beautiful sure, of course, should only be seen by me alone. His soft and gentle voice was like the prelude played by the most elegant cello. It could easily make people sink into it. Gu Xingyin allowed herself to sink into it. When the other 5 people finished washing up and walked out of the room, the first thing they saw was this. The slender man and woman were hugging each other like a pair of tangled mandarin ducks. Qin Qingqing whispered, "Did we appear at the wrong time?" When she said this, she felt a little depressed. She recognized that the man was that mysterious and powerful handsome man, but she had never seen the woman before. This beauty was clearly calling Leng Shi his bride earlier, but it had only been a short while, and he was already hugging another woman. Sure enough, men were creatures that could not be trusted at all. At this moment, Qin Qingqing had completely forgotten that there was no other woman in this castle. Then, she saw the man and woman separate and look over. Qin Qingqing. That was actually Leng Shi? Gao Lingji thought that she would sleep, but she underestimated her diligence. It was 4 in the morning, and 6 in the morning tomorrow. Those who felt that she was very diligent could vote for her, and leave comments on her face. Good night. Chapter 1769. Not only Qin Qingqing, but everyone's eyes widened as they stared at Gu Xingyin, who was standing beside the man in purple. After being together for so long, they all knew that Leng Shi was very beautiful. She was not the kind of beauty that would make you think that this woman was not bad-looking at first glance. Instead, she was the kind of beauty that would make you fall into a daze and be infinitely surprised that you could actually see such a beautiful person in real life other than on the big screen. However, even though they all admitted that Leng Shi was a beauty, at this moment, when they saw Leng Shi standing there elegantly in a classical Western palace dress, they were still shocked. She was actually so beautiful. Moreover, she clearly had the facial features of an Asian. But when she wore this dress, it actually looked so harmonious on her. The dark purple dress was fitted neatly on Gu Xingyin's body. The size was so perfect that it was as if it was specially made for her. The sleeves and edges of the dress were outlined with exquisite patterns with golden threads. The hemline of the dress poured down like flowing water on the ground, charming and enchanting. Qin Qingqing covered her mouth with her hand. Such a dress was probably every woman's lifelong dream, right? The man standing beside Gu Xingyin was a little displeased. He frowned as he looked at those people who were dazed by Gu Xingyin's beauty, and his eyes darkened for a moment. He did not like these people looking at his bride with such eyes. He wanted to hide her. It was best for such beauty to only be seen by himself. The man held Gu Xingyin's arm possessively and looked at the others. "I already know the ins and outs of everyone here. Do you need me to send you out now?" He did not reject these people, but he did not like them very much either. Since they came with Shi, he would send them out properly. Out. When everyone heard these 2 words, their hearts were filled with endless excitement. When they came with the mentality of adventure and curiosity. But after coming, they only had one goal left in their hearts, to get out alive. And now, there was someone who casually said that he could send them out. Of course they were willing. Everyone's eyes lit up almost instantly. They looked at the man as if he was a god. The man probably already knew their answer. He nodded. "Then I'll send you out." "Wait." Qin Qingqing suddenly mustered up the courage to speak. She looked at this extremely handsome man and suddenly pointed at Gu Xingyin. "Sister Leng Shi, aren't you coming with us?" When everyone heard her words, they realized that Gu Xingyin wasn't included in the everyone the man mentioned. If it was before they came here, perhaps they would be overjoyed that they could be saved and would not care about others at all. But now things were different. In their hearts, if it weren't for Gu Xingyin, they wouldn't have made it here alive. Not to mention, there was still a chance to leave this place alive. Therefore, they could not abandon Gu Xingyin and go out alone at this time. Zhang Chao said, "The 6 of us came together. Of course, we will leave together." The others nodded as well. Gu Xingyin's heart warmed when she saw this. It was a great feeling to see his kindness being reciprocated in kind. She glanced at the man and suddenly said with a smile, "You can leave first. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine here." Chapter 1770. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, everyone looked like they wanted to say something. They didn't expect that the man didn't say anything, but Leng sure did. Looking at the long dress she was wearing, which was obviously the same as the mysterious man's, everyone felt like they were being lovey-dovey. At the same time, they were also guessing in their hearts. Could it be that this man was right? Leng sure was his destined bride? For someone like Qin Qingqing, who had a rich imagination, she had already imagined an unparalleled love from her previous life. The man's eyelids trembled. He didn't say anything and waved his hand. Before anyone could react, they found that their line of sight had shifted. When they came back to their senses, they found themselves outside the castle. Their backpacks and food were on the ground beside them. Qin Qingqing stared at herself in a daze, then looked at the people around her. She then looked at the ghost castle in the distance, which was still shrouded in dark clouds. She pinched herself hard, still in disbelief. I'm out? The pain from her body told her that this wasn't a dream. Qingge, who was standing beside her, couldn't help but smile. "That's right, we're really out." "Ah." Qin Qingqing suddenly screamed in excitement, and then threw herself onto Qing Jiyi's body. She hugged him and shouted, "We're out! We're out of that damned place alive. I'm still alive." Qingge felt a little uncomfortable when his body was hugged. However, he quickly relaxed and gave Qin Qingqing a hug as well. "That's right. We're out alive." At a time like this, what could make people happier than a hug from their companions? They stood there excitedly for a while, then looked worriedly at the castle. Leng Sure was still inside. Zhang Chao thought for a while and said, "Since Leng Sure said that there wouldn't be any problems, it means that she's confident." Xuewan nodded. She said, "I think we don't have to worry about Xuewan. That mysterious man in purple is obviously infatuated with her to the bone. He won't hurt her." Everyone thought so, and felt that it should be so. After completely relaxing, Qin Qingqing suddenly thought of a problem. She said with a bitter expression, "We told the driver that we would pick him up in 10 days, but it's only been 2 days." Hearing this, everyone turned around to take a look. There was a vast expanse of yellow sand, and not a single person could be seen. So the question was, how were they going to return? Everyone. Zhang Chao slowly put his backpack on his shoulder and said with a smile, "This adventure has unexpectedly ended prematurely. It seems that we can only have a healthy walk." The others also laughed. They had just escaped from such a place, so for them, anything that they encountered now was basically nothing. One by one, they picked up their bags and walked in the opposite direction of the castle. At this moment, Zhang Chao suddenly turned around to take a look. What he saw shocked him. Look! Everyone turned around and saw a scene that shocked them. In the distance, the ghost castle, which was shrouded in black clouds, seemed to have been destroyed by some great power. Starting from the bottom, it started to crumble inch by inch. First 2 chapters, today's 6th chapter. The remaining 4 chapters might have to be released at night. Gao Lingji's relatives seemed to be coming to visit. She lay half dead on the stove and cried for an entire day. It's the end of the month, and it's a new week. Don't stock up on goods. Chapter 1771. It was as if they were watching a fantasy blockbuster. Everyone was so shocked that they couldn't speak for a long time. They watched as the majestic castle was razed to the ground in an instant. After a long while, Qin Qingqing asked in a daze, "Sister Leng Sure is still in the castle? She won't have an accident, right?" Everyone looked at each other. Zhang Chao said uncertainly, "It shouldn't be a problem, right? That man looks very powerful." Although he said that, his expression was obviously worried. At this moment, Xuewan suddenly cried out in surprise. Everyone followed her gaze and saw an extremely unbelievable scene again. A tall building rose from the ground. They had all heard of these words before, but this was the first time they had truly felt these words. They saw that in the ruins where the ghost castle used to be, There seemed to be an invisible hand controlling it. Countless rubble and bricks automatically combined and rose bit by bit. A new castle slowly took shape in front of their eyes. If the scene of the ghost castle collapsing just now was like watching a fantasy blockbuster, then the scene of a castle appearing out of thin air at this moment was simply like a miracle. All of this was too inconceivable. Qin Qingqing said in a daze, "That man, is he a god? Otherwise, how could he have such a shocking ability?" No one could answer her question. Back to the castle. After Qin Qingqing and the others left the castle, the man held Gu Xingyin's hand. "My bride, you don't seem to know me well enough." The man bent down and gently leaned his forehead against Gu Xingyin's forehead. In an instant, countless memories appeared in Gu Xingyin's mind. It was about the life of another person, a man named Nicholas Brent Filton. He was born in a famous noble family. He was supposed to be the eldest son of the family and the future heir. However, because his birth mother was unknown, his position had always been quite awkward. Later, his father, the promiscuous Duke of Violet, married the princess of the empire, and even left an heir with an even more noble status. His position as the eldest son was even more awkward. Moreover, as he grew older, there were many different aspects of his body that were different from ordinary people. His appearance was extraordinarily handsome. He could see things at night, talk to animals, and even use the legendary magic. Under the manipulation of his noble stepmother, he was labeled as a heretic by the church at that time. The so-called heretics were different from ordinary people, and should be burned to death. He was drugged by his father, tied up, and burned at the stake. When he saw the fire burning around him, and felt the scorching heat, Nicholas' heart sank. He didn't feel that death was scary. The only thing that chilled his heart was the way his biological father looked at him. His eyes were filled with fear and disgust instead of looking at his own son. Then everyone saw a miraculous scene. This person who was called a heretic was not afraid of fire at all. Those flames licked his body, but they didn't even ignite the corner of his clothes. It was also at that time that Nicholas met his mother for the first time. A woman so beautiful that she made people forget to breathe. Chapter 1772. That woman had a perfect and delicate face. She wore a gorgeous robe carved out of ice and snow, and wore a noble crown on her head. The moment her real body descended into the fire, the temperature of the entire place dropped. The flames seemed to have met their natural enemy, and they trembled and extinguished. On that day, Nicholas finally knew that he was not some lowly bastard, but the child of God. The snow goddess, who was traveling the continent in the incarnation of the snow goddess, fell in love with the Violet Duke at first sight, and developed a romantic relationship with him. And Nicholas was the result of this relationship. Not long after the snow goddess gave birth to Nicholas, she returned to the divine realm, and the Violet Duke, who was a playboy by nature, quickly forgot his beautiful lover. Although she did not have many feelings for Nicholas, the snow goddess was still angry about what happened to him, which was rare. In the eyes of God, the way the people of this country treated her child was an indirect blasphemy. She took Nicholas away on the spot, and personally gave him God's punishment. The whole country was ravaged by snow and ice for an entire year. Food could not be grown, and countless people froze to death or starved to death. The rule of the whole country began to be in danger. No one dared to blame God, so they all vented their anger on the family that mistreated Nicholas. The Duke and the princess lived in fear every day, deeply afraid that they would be retaliated against by the rioting people if they went out one day. But in the end they still did not escape. The Holy See, which had once condemned Nicholas as a heretic, reached an agreement with the royal family. They personally tied up the Violet Duke and the princess, and made them kneel in front of the altar. They also said that they were willing to pay any price, just for the great snow goddess to appease her anger. In the end, the Violet Duke, his princess wife, and the child who was born with a noble status were forever exiled from the country. And Nicholas became the new Violet Duke. Because of his bloodline, Nicholas was almost immortal. He had experienced countless dynasties, and he had seen countless emperors ascend the throne and die. He even controlled the change of royal power in this huge dynasty. He became the most powerful man in this dynasty, and no one had any objections. until he finally grew tired of this world. Thus he sealed himself in his castle and fell into a deep slumber. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat when she finished reading these memories. This man seemed to be of noble status, but he must have lived a very lonely life, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have sealed himself into a deep slumber. A pair of hands reached out and covered her eyes. I told you not to look at me like that. I won't be able to control myself. A low and hoarse voice sounded in her ears. Besides, I'm not as pitiful as you think. I sealed myself because I felt that the world was too boring, and I desperately wanted to see my bride. Gu Xingyin reached out to grab his hand and pulled it down. She looked at him in surprise. By the way, you haven't told me why you call me your bride. And how do you know that I'm your bride? Chapter 1773. Nicholas looked at her and said with a smile, "Let me put it this way. Among all my mother's children, I am the one who has inherited her divine bloodline the most perfectly. So, I can probably have power that is almost comparable to that of a god." Gu Xingyin blinked. So, Nicholas hugged her and sat down on the seat covered with thick feathers. During that period of time when I was quite bored, I slowly began to explore some new fields such as time. Gu Xingyin looked up at him in surprise. She had once become a god, so she naturally knew that the law of time was not something that could be easily controlled by gods. Generally speaking, except for those gods who were born with the priesthood of time, few other gods would devote themselves to studying this. As for Nicholas, he was a demigod. Why would he research this? Nicholas thought she was curious about this. He said, "I slowly came into contact with the law of time. At first, I caused a lot of trouble, but later, I slowly became very familiar with it. It was also at that time that I saw you." Gu Xingyin was shocked. She looked at Nicholas, who also lowered his head and looked at her. Because of the bloodline in my body, I also have some understanding of some things that are completely different from human beings. For example, the first time I saw you, I knew that you were my future bride. At first, I was just curious. I wanted to know what kind of woman I would be with in the future, and what about you could attract me. Nicholas's lips curled into a charming smile, and he looked a little helpless. Who knew that I would fall in just like that? I actually fell in love with my future bride more than 1,000 years in advance. Nicholas couldn't help but lower his head and gently rub Gu Xingyin's forehead. He sighed with satisfaction. You don't know how maddening it is to fall in love with someone but not be able to find her. At that time, when I thought that I would not be able to see you for another 1,000 years, I felt anxious and desperate. At that time, I even thought of traveling through time, but my mother found out about it and stopped me personally. She said that if I rashly traveled through time, perhaps nothing would happen to me, but many things would change because of my actions. Even you might disappear from the future because of my careless actions. Nicholas said helplessly. I didn't dare to take such a big risk, but I also felt that time was too long, so I simply set up a formation and sealed myself. Gu Xingyin was speechless for a long time after hearing her words. She had never thought that there would be someone in this world who had waited for her for so long. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't say a word for a long time. In the end, she could only curse softly, "Idiot." Nicholas smiled and hugged her tightly. This fool is the fool who loves you the most in this world. Gu Xingyin buried her head in his arms and couldn't help but smile. Oh right. Nicholas seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He sounded a little apologetic. I know about some of the things that happened to you in this castle. It's my negligence. Because the castle's ceiling formation contains a huge amount of spiritual power, it can easily attract wandering souls and wild ghosts. Who would have thought that the territory of the Violet Duke would turn into a ghost castle that scares the living daylights out of people? Chapter 1774. Nicholas's tone was a little unpleasant. Fortunately, almost no one in this world knew him. Otherwise, even if those people did not dare to show it on their faces, they would definitely laugh at him for this matter in their hearts. As he thought about it, he suddenly stood up with Gu Xingyin in his arms. I'll take you to watch a good show. The moment he spoke, Gu Xingyin felt the scene in front of her change instantly. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in the sky. That's right, she was in Nicholas's arms, and the two of them were standing in the air. Nicholas looked at her and asked, "Aren't you afraid?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "No, I think this feeling is very good." Nicholas laughed. As expected of his bride. Normal people would be scared to tears in such a situation, but she was the only one who was so calm. He turned his head and looked at the ominous black fog below. The entire castle was old and decayed, and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. His place had actually been reduced to such a state by these ghosts. Since you're a soul body, don't stay in the world and harm the living. Disperse, he said with an indifferent expression. Then, from under his feet, a wild snowstorm appeared in the sky. The snowstorm, which had the power to tear the world apart, shrouded the castle. Starting from the inside, whether it was the shivering ghosts or the old castle that had stood for thousands of years, they all dissipated under this power. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and watched Nicholas turn the castle into ruins in an instant. Where will you live in the future? Nicholas was speechless. From the beginning, he had been waiting for Gu Xingyin to ask him questions. He was prepared to answer any question, but he never expected that she would ask such an unexpected question. He could not help but laugh. "I want to marry my bride. Naturally, I can't keep such a shabby castle." Gu Xingyin tilted her head and said deliberately, "Then the great Violet Duke, do you want to give me a bigger and more gorgeous castle?" Nicholas looked at her with a smile. "So this is what Shershur likes." Before Gu Xingyin could say anything, he nodded. "That makes sense. My bride should live in the most gorgeous castle in the world." Thus, there was the scene that everyone saw in front of them. A castle that would take at least years to build if it took manpower was built by Nicholas in an instant. He landed in the newly built castle with her. There was a boundless field of violet flowers, which was the symbol of Nicholas's family emblem. "I heard that in your world, the groom should have a house to marry his bride." Nicholas asked. "Gu Xingyin, what kind of weird program did you watch?" Then, she saw Nicholas take a step back and stand elegantly in front of her. Suddenly, a fiery red flower appeared in his hand. "Then, fair Miss Lench, I will give you this castle as a betrothal gift. Will you marry me and become my bride, Nicholas Brent Filton?" Gu Xingyin. She could not help but laugh. Nicholas looked at her in confusion. However, Gu Xingyin did not explain. Instead, he smiled and reached out to take the words from his hand. "All right, since you've waited for me so sincerely for 1,000 years, I'll reluctantly agree to your request." 10 chapters ended. Gao Lingji confirmed that there would not be an update tomorrow morning. Gao Lingji had a stomachache and could not continue writing. See you tomorrow during the day. I will continue to update. Babies, vote for Wang Gingji, okay? Good night. Chapter 1775. Gu Xingyin stayed in the castle with Nicholas for a long time. She was different from others. Because she liked to take risks, she didn't have any fixed friends around her. Her family was no longer in this world. Basically, everything was arranged by herself. By the way, are there any other gods in this world now? On this day, Gu Xingyin sat on the swing in the castle garden, feeling the warm sunlight. She turned her head and asked the handsome man standing behind her. A trace of nostalgia flashed in Nicholas's eyes. Of course there are. Gods are almost immortal. Even if they choose to sleep or reincarnate for various reasons, one day, their consciousness will be revived. Nicholas turned his head. His gaze seemed to penetrate countless spaces and see a very distant place. Maybe a businessman who runs a mall or a very famous star is secretly a god who was once worshipped by countless people. Gu Xingyin was thoughtful. Her cell phone suddenly rang. She opened the interface and a message from Shui Wen came from the social media app. "Li Chang and I are going to get married next month. Would you like to come to my wedding?" Speaking of which, when they came to the castle, mobile phones and other things basically lost their function. It wasn't until Nicholas built a new castle that everything here returned to normal. As for the other 5, they finally got in touch with Gu Xingyin. Perhaps because they had experienced life and death together, the relationship between them had become very good. Zhang Chao created a group and pulled all of them into this small group. Gu Xingyin's fingers moved. So fast. Shuewan replied with a shy expression. He and I both feel that we are the most suitable people for each other. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and said, Okay, I will attend on time. Putting down the phone, Gu Xingyin looked up at Nicholas. Nicholas asked, What's wrong? Gu Xingyin said, I have a friend next month who came here with me before. They are getting married. Do you want to go to the wedding with me? Nicholas answered without hesitation. Of course. It's my duty to accompany you to all kinds of banquets. His understanding of certain things was still 1,000 years ago. In the era he lived in, as lovers who had confirmed their relationship, as a man, he naturally had to accompany his female companion to various social events. This was the duty of lovers, and also a way to announce their relationship to everyone. Even though he knew that this was no longer important, Nicholas still couldn't change it easily. However, it didn't seem like there was anything to change. After all, the only person he cared about after waking up was Gu Xingyin. Staying by her side and following her wherever she went was something that he would definitely do. Gu Xingyin had expected his answer. She smiled mischievously. When the time comes, I'll take you there. It'll definitely cause a sensation. Nicholas was a little confused. Gu Xingyin gently swayed the swing and sighed. Beauty. You probably don't understand how much people in this world are obsessed with looks. Chapter 1776. Nicholas chuckled softly when he heard this. Gu Xingyin was puzzled. What are you laughing at? She recalled what she had just said and didn't think there was anything wrong with it. The next moment, Nicholas' figure appeared beside her. The two sat on the swing together, and the golden sunlight shone on his God-given face. Gu Xingyin looked up at him, and her breath caught slightly. Nicholas said with a smile, I can actually understand what you mean. In my time, people also pursued beauty. Every time the Violet Duke went out, the carriage was specially made, because there would be many men and women who admired the Duke's beauty and tried everything to get close to him. According to the customs at that time, this kind of thing was a beautiful thing. Nicholas couldn't be angry because of this, and even punished those who challenged the Duke's dignity. Hearing Nicholas's words, Gu Xingyin almost fell into his arms with laughter. She could imagine what a spectacular scene it would be. Nicholas just gently reached out his hand to support her back, to prevent his lover from falling because of the intense movements. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was the wedding day that Shuewan had promised. Gu Xingyin and Nicholas came to the address that Shuewan had told them. Before entering the hotel, the two were baptized by countless gazes. There were even several hot beauties who had the courage to strike up a conversation with Nicholas, completely ignoring the fact that he had a female companion with him. Gu Xingyin helplessly curved her lips and said to Nicholas, I knew that I would face such treatment when I was with you. Nicholas glanced at the many gazes that were looking in his direction. He could clearly see that most of these gazes were from men. These people were not interested in him. Did his bride not realize that her attractiveness to men was not much weaker than her attractiveness to women? At this time, the groom, Li Chang, noticed this side. When he saw Gu Xingyin, he smiled and hurried over to greet her. Lungshe, you're here? Everyone is here, except for you. At this moment, he also saw Nicholas standing behind Gu Xingyin. The smile on Li Chang's face froze. Of course he recognized Nicholas. At that time, this man had left a deep impression on them. And this one, Gu Xingyin promptly added, my husband, you can call him Filton. Nicholas continued Gu Xingyin's words and said calmly. He nodded slightly at Li Chang and said in a restrained and reserved tone, Mr. Li Chang, I wish you a happy marriage. Li Chang's entire body stiffened. Facing this man, he found that he would always inadvertently become nervous. Thank you, Mr. Felton. Even when he addressed Nicholas, he could not help but use honorifics. Nicholas's expression was not unnatural at all. He was already used to people treating him with such respect. Li Chang brought the two of them to a place in the hall. Over there, Qingge, Zhang Chao and Qin Qingqing were all there. Everyone was surprised to see Nicholas. They did not expect that this man would actually accompany Lungshe to the wedding. Gu Xingyin looked helplessly at their unnatural and reserved attitudes, but she also understood them. Chapter 1777. Looking at their expressions, Nicholas clearly understood that with him around, they wouldn't be able to let go. He whispered something to Gu Xingyin, and then said to the others, "I still have something to do. You guys take your time." After he finished speaking, he nodded at everyone, turned around, and walked out. They waited for him to leave before they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Zhang Chao laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "I'm more nervous facing this person than facing my boss." Qin Qingqing also covered her chest with a smile and made an exaggerated expression. "That's right. I've never been so honest with our grade director." She was wearing a light green dress today, which made her look playful and cute. As she spoke, she looked at Gu Xingyin with a gossipy expression. "Are you and him really together?" The others also looked over curiously. There was nothing to hide. Gu Xingyin nodded generously. Qingge looked a little worried. After all, he's in that situation. "You guys." He wanted to say something but hesitated. Gu Xingyin smiled brightly. "It's nothing. Don't worry. We're fine." Her happiness was written all over her face. When everyone saw this, they didn't say anything else. As the groom today, Li Chang was very busy. Everyone only gathered together and said a few words before they drove him away to receive other guests. Qin Qingqing looked at Gu Xingyin with her chin in her hand and suddenly said with emotion, "Actually, Sister Leng Shi, it's pretty good for you to be with Mr. Filton." Without waiting for Gu Xingyin's reply, she looked into the distance and said with longing in her eyes, "If I could sleep with such a peerless beauty just once, I would die without regrets." Zhang Chao rubbed the goosebumps on his arms. "Are young girls nowadays so open?" Qin Qingqing rolled her eyes at him. "An old man like you won't understand me." The old Zhang Chao man felt hurt. He silently thought about that mysterious and powerful Mr. Filton, who seemed to be the same age as the castle, and silently expressed that he did not want to speak. Gu Xingyin and a few others witnessed the wedding of Li Chang and Xuewan. After the wedding, she went to meet the bride with Nicholas and gave her the gifts she had prepared. "This is a gift that Nicholas and I specially prepared for you. It can bring you luck." Gu Xingyin winked. Xuewan took it with a smile. After all the guests had left, the couple began to open the gifts slowly. It was Gu Xingyin's turn to bring up the small box. Xuewan thought of the mysterious man standing beside her, and couldn't help but feel curious about their gifts. She slowly opened the delicate little box in her hand. "Wow, it's so beautiful." Xuewan's eyes sparkled. Inside the box were two necklaces that obviously belonged to a couple. There was a thumb-sized snowball on the silver chain. She didn't know what material the snowball was made of. At a glance, it was pure white like snow, but upon closer inspection, it was made of countless transparent and colorless crystals. The other style was not much different, but the chain was much thicker, and the style of the snowball was not so exquisite. Thinking of the mysterious man, Xuewan said, "Li Chang, shall I put it on for you?" Li Chang also felt that this snowball necklace should be something extraordinary, especially since Leng Shi said that it could bring luck. It must have its use, so he nodded. Chapter 1778. Ever since Xuewan and Li Chang put on this snowball necklace, they had never taken it off. They didn't know if this necklace could really bring good luck. Not long after the two of them got married, they both resigned and started a small business with the savings in their hands and some spare money given by the two parents. Originally, the two of them didn't have much hope, but who knew that their journey would be smooth sailing without any hiccups. Their business grew bigger and bigger, and they slowly expanded their small shop, developed branches, and became a chain, until they were successfully listed. The couple firmly believed that this was the credit of the necklace that Leng Shi had given them back then. Even later, Xuewan had a lot of money and bought countless pieces of jewelry. However, she always wore that very beautiful snowball necklace on her neck. Others had also asked her curiously, but Xuewan only smiled mysteriously. "This is something very important to me." In this winter, Gu Xingyin and Nicholas held a wedding. The wedding guests were the 5 people who had been to the castle with Gu Xingyin. To be honest, They still had some shadows about this place. But they still agreed to come together. After arriving here, they quickly forgot to exclaim in amazement. While Zhang Chao was amazed, he carried out his instinct as a reporter and took hundreds of photos in one breath. Qin Qingqing still had a dreamy look on her face. I will feel like a real princess having a wedding in such a castle. She looked at Gu Xingyin enviously. She was now the mistress of a castle that was even more gorgeous than a foreign palace. Here, she was more than a princess. She was simply an empress. The wedding between the two of them was simple and solemn. The only audience was only 5 people. Everything was quiet and sacred. Only the moment the two of them exchanged rings, everyone's eyes suddenly blurred. The air suddenly became cool and thin. A woman wearing a gorgeous ice blue robe and a crown of ice and snow on her head appeared in the hall. She held a scepter in her hand, and at the top of the scepter was an exquisite 6-colored snowflake. She had long silver white hair that fell to the ground, long and curly silver eyelashes, and even her eyes were clean and cold silver white. This person was like the noble and powerful ice goddess from the legends. The few of them were shocked. Qin Qingqing covered her mouth to prevent herself from screaming. Nicholas seemed a little surprised by her appearance. He held Gu Xingyin's hand and bowed to the woman. "Mother, why are you here?" The woman's gaze swept over Gu Xingyin's body. Gu Xingyin only felt her whole body turn cold, as if she was surrounded by ice. "My dear Nicholas, you should have informed me about your wedding." Nicholas's expression remained unchanged. "I thought Mother wasn't interested in this kind of thing." The woman's expression remained indifferent. "You are my favorite child. Naturally, I have to give you my blessings on your wedding day." As she spoke, the scepter in her hand suddenly flashed with silver light, and a dazzling radiance like a star directly descended upon Gu Xingyin. "In the name of the ice goddess, lucky human, I bestow upon you a long life, a face that will never age, and a beautiful love that everyone yearns for." Her voice was ethereal and cold, faintly resounding in the void, but it seemed to resonate with the entire world. This story ended very quickly. In the next world, teachers and students abstinence. The spoiler ended here. Chapter 1779. Gu Xingyin felt as if an invisible force had entered her body. Her mind jolted, and she couldn't help but close her eyes in comfort. She took a step forward and bowed deeply to the beautiful woman who seemed to be carved out of ice. "Lungsure, thanks, Mother." The beauty nodded coldly and gave Nicholas a look. Her figure flashed again, and she disappeared without a trace. Everyone was dumbstruck. After a long while, Qin Qingqing rubbed her face hard. She didn't care that the makeup she had painstakingly put on was messed up. She said in a daze, "I think I was hallucinating just now." After she said that, Zhang Chao also said, "I think I was hallucinating too." The others said in unison, "We all seem to be hallucinating." 5 pairs of eyes fell on Gu Xingyin in an instant, and their burning gazes seemed to burn through her. Gu Xingyin was speechless. She said in amusement, "None of you were hallucinating." Actually, everyone already knew. How could such a realistic feeling be a hallucination? Shuewan said carefully, "So that person just now." Nicholas said, "That's my mother, Ice Goddess Dorisvina. She controls the cold and ice of this continent." Everyone was speechless. After living for so many years, I just realized that I don't know anything about this world. Ice Goddess? Goddess. So, as the child of the Ice Goddess, Filton was the true son of God? Qin Qingqing felt as if she knew a huge secret. "I suddenly feel like this world is a little fantasy, and I seem to know something incredible. I think I might need to wash my face with cold water to calm down," she said incoherently. She wasn't the only one. In fact, the others didn't have much better reactions. Just now, they actually saw a real goddess. Zhang Chao looked at Nicholas with burning eyes. He asked carefully, "Mr. Filton, may I take a picture of you?" He tightened his grip on the camera in his hand. God, this was the descendant of God. He felt that if he could take a picture of him, it would bring him good luck. Nicholas did not refuse. Qin Qingqing was one of the more courageous ones. Although she was very nervous facing Nicholas, she still bravely requested to take a picture with him. Of course, Nicholas would not reject such a small request from his wife's friend. The others also came up one after another, and Nicholas took a picture with them. Qin Qingqing held the photo and smiled proudly. Taking a photo with the Son of God. In this world, other than the few of us, who else can do it? After a whole day of excitement, they didn't go back that night. Instead, they stayed in the castle. However, this did not affect Gu Xingyin and Nicholas. As long as Nicholas wanted to, he would not be able to hear anything that others were not supposed to hear. The two of them had a romantic and wonderful wedding night. The next day, the five of them tactfully excused themselves, leaving time and space for Gu Xingyin and the other newlyweds. Nicholas hugged Gu Xingyin's waist and watched as the cars disappeared from his sight. "It's finally just the two of us," he mumbled. Gu Xingyin couldn't help laughing. No matter how arrogant and reserved this man was in front of others, he was always affectionate and clingy in front of her. She couldn't help holding his hand. "From now on, we have enough time to be together. Just the two of us. Just you and me." Chapter 1780. As soon as the last world ended, Gu Xingyin couldn't wait to start the next mission. When Gu Xingyin came to this world, she found herself in a quiet classroom. The students beside her were all quiet, and she was lying on the desk. Obviously, the owner of this body was sleeping. The female student in the fourth position on the left of the fifth row. "The one in yellow, please answer my question." A cold and restrained voice sounded in the quiet classroom. With a whoosh, countless eyes gathered in Gu Xingyin's direction. Gu Xingyin. According to her experience, there was an 80% chance that she was the girl in the fourth position on the left of the fifth row. He looked down and sure enough, she was wearing a light yellow knitted coat today. She subconsciously raised her head and stood up. Gu Xingyin met the eyes of the person on the podium. "Teacher." She opened her mouth and shouted. The man on the podium was expressionless. "Is there a problem? The student?" Gu Xingyin quickly shook her head. She was just using this opportunity to let the system, who had just come to this world, give her a cheat. Then Gu Xingyin opened her mouth and said a long sentence in a very clear tone. The person on the podium listened very seriously. When Gu Xingyin finished, he waved his hand and told her to sit down. This student just now answered very well. She has her own opinions. Next we. Gu Xingyin quietly let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, system. The host is too polite. Begin the transmission of the world's plot," she said. "Yes, host." Gu Xingyin slowly looked at the plot of this world. The original Zhang Yu was a second-year student in a university's literature department. She was considered to be an excellent student, with a good family background and a very beautiful face. This girl had a very silly personality. She liked anime, web novels, and 2D novels. She was always half a beat slower when communicating with people, and often made some small jokes. Her friends jokingly called her Zhang Mingming. In short, this was a girl with a very likable personality, appearance, and overall very likable. The mission target of this world, Deng Huijun, was considered Zhang Yu's cousin in terms of relationship. Deng Huijuan's mother and Zhang Yu's mother were biological sisters. However, the two families never had much contact because Deng Huijuan's mother, Zhao Li, was taken by a married man and got pregnant out of wedlock. She fell out with her family and insisted on being with that man. The Zhao family had been a family of scholars since the previous dynasty. They were especially strict with the education of their children. This matter disappointed Zhang Yu's grandmother's family. From then on, they treated it as if they never had this daughter. Deng Huijuan's mother, Zhao Li, was also a schemer. After a few years of being a mistress, she finally succeeded in bewitching the man to abandon his wife and son and get married to Zhao Zhao's. Became a legitimate thought to be S's Bts not accept her. Who knew that she was completely. The Zhaos were determined not to accept this disgraceful daughter. Her sister, Zhang Yu's mother Zhao Qing, and Zhang Yu's father were in love. After 2 years of free love, they also got married. The Zhangs were also a real. They were both daughters, and they both married into rich families. However, the treatment they received at home was like heaven and earth. Chapter 1781. Of course, Zhao Li felt unbalanced in her heart. Over time, this kind of imbalance twisted into a kind of resentment towards her family. Not only her father and brothers, but even her sister, Zhao Qing, who was married off, became the target of resentment. Zhao Li originally thought that her life was complete. So what if she was looked down upon as a mistress? In the end, didn't she defeat all those who used to laugh at her and successfully marry into a rich family? However, once she saw her sister, Zhao Qing, Zhao Li's heart felt very uneasy. The Zhang family's family background was not worse than the Deng family's, but Zhang Yu's father, Zhang Qiqing, was much younger and more handsome than her husband, Deng Yuanlin. Moreover, the two of them fell in love freely. The Zhang family also liked Zhao Qing very much as their daughter-in-law. Zhao Li thought that her looks and methods were not inferior to her sister, Zhao Qing. However, she had spent a lot of effort, suffered a lot of disdain before she got what she wanted. However, Zhao Qing easily held it in her hands. She was really unbalanced. Deng Huijun was influenced by her mother since she was young. Naturally, she did not have any good feelings towards the Zhang family. Similarly, she was very disgusted with her aunt, who was the Zhang family's wife. She was 6 years older than Zhang Yu. After she graduated with a master's degree, she chose to teach at a university. It was also by chance that Deng Huijun found out that her cousin, who was born from her aunt, was also admitted to a university. She went back and told her mother, Zhao Li, about this matter. Zhao Li knew about Zhang Yu. She had 3 siblings in her family, her eldest brother, her and her youngest sister, Zhao Qing. She heard that Zhao Qing's daughter was very doted on at home. In the Zhao family, she was also the apple of her parents' eye. However, her daughter, Deng Huijun, had never even stepped through the door of her grandmother's house. Zhao Li was very unreconciled. She and her daughter, Deng Huijun, discussed for a long time. Deng Huijun came up with a plan. Mom, didn't you say that my grandfather's family pretended to be virtuous, old-fashioned, and inflexible? Think about it. If my obedient and cute cousin became a rebellious girl on the streets who was entangled with a married man, would they still recognize her as their granddaughter? From that day onwards, Deng Huijun began to deliberately approach Zhang Yu. In her opinion, a 20-year-old girl like Zhang Yu would be easily attracted to the outside world. Zhang Yu didn't know this cousin of hers, but under Deng Huijuan's repeated coincidences, the two of them quickly became familiar with each other. Gradually, Deng Huijun began to take Zhang Yu to bars several times unintentionally. She even introduced Zhang Yu to several handsome men. She even understood the appeal of mature and successful men to young girls. Their knowledge and experience were not something that those young boys in school could compare to. However, Zhang Yu was not as easy to deal with as she had imagined. She even seemed to have noticed something and gradually stopped contacting Deng Huijun. Deng Huijun gritted her teeth in anger and cursed Zhang Yu for being cunning and scheming. She thought about it and decided to go all the way. One day, she invited Zhang Yu to a tea house in the name of having a good talk. Zhang Yu thought about it for a long time. Seeing that the tea house was indeed a proper place, he agreed to Deng Huijuan's invitation. However, she had never imagined that Deng Huijun would actually dare to drug her in front of so many people. In a small private room separated by frosted glass, Gu Xingyin just took a sip of tea. She fainted. Deng Huijun took her away and sent her to the person she had bribed with the excuse that her vertigo was acting up. The 7th update. 3 more chapters. See you later. Chapter 1782. Deng Huijuan's motive was very simple. She just wanted to destroy Zhang Yu. Zhang Yu only took a sip of tea and actually woke up in the room. But it was useless even if she woke up. She was alone in the room and the door was locked. The railings outside the French window only reached her waist, but this was the 10th floor. She couldn't even run away. Deng Huijun had spent a lot of money to hire that man. No matter what Gu Xingyin said, he wouldn't give in. He just wanted to finish the job quickly and take the money. Besides, after seeing Zhang Yu's face, he felt that this job was a good one for him. He didn't take Zhang Yu's resistance to heart. Anyway, how many clean women could he find at this age? But Zhang Yu's fierceness was far beyond his expectations. After confirming that she couldn't escape, Gu Xingyin suddenly said that she was willing to cooperate, but she was a little nervous and wanted to drink a glass of water first. It was better for both parties to be willing than to force himself on her. The man also knew that Zhang Yu couldn't run away, so he asked her to stay here and went to the kitchen. Zhang Yu took out the phone with the SIM card removed, recorded an audio, and left the phone on the sofa. Then, when the man came with the water, she jumped down from the railing without hesitation. She fell from the 10th floor. She died on the spot. Gu Xingyin was shocked by this girl's fierceness. Then she was impressed. She knew that many people in this world had a saying, when you meet a rapist, if you can't resist, then you can enjoy it. But there were always some people who she didn't want to give in to. It wasn't that she had to be a chaste woman, but there were some things that she couldn't stand. Maybe some people would think that this was stupid, but no one could blame this 20-year-old flower-like girl. In the original plot, the police found the phone left on the sofa by Zhang Yu and heard the audio she left. No matter how powerful the Deng family was, Deng Huijun couldn't escape the punishment of the law in the end. But Gu Xingyin still came to this world. Perhaps the laws of the world felt that Zhang Yu's death was too unjust. Her life should not have ended so cruelly at such a young age. Gu Xingyin was still in a daze when she heard her name being called out again. She stood up with a puzzled expression. The man on the podium looked at her confused look. She was like a stupid rabbit that had eaten too much. His heart was pitted for a moment. He said coldly, "Student, please answer my question." Gu Xingyin. Why is it me again? Who the hell knows what you just asked? The almighty system once again played its role. Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the satisfied expression on the man's face. She sat down. Her deskmate whispered to her, "Meng Meng, you are really amazing. You can know the answer even when you are in a daze. You are indeed a top student." Gu Xingyin. She suddenly felt a little pain in her face. Then her deskmate said with some surprise, "But why did Teacher Guan ask you to answer 2 questions today? He doesn't know you, does he?" As she spoke, her voice became excited. "Oh my God, to be remembered by Teacher Guan is really an exciting thing." Gu Xingyin. Was it a good thing to be called out by the teacher twice because she was in a daze? Chapter 1783. However, this interlude made her forget about her mission for the time being. She took a good look at Teacher Guan. With one look, she finally understood why this person was so popular. This man was wearing a neat suit on the podium. Every button of his shirt was neatly buttoned, his cuffs were neat, and his hair was combed neatly. From his appearance alone, one could tell that this was a man who was usually very disciplined. A disciplined man was very attractive to the opposite sex, especially when this man had a handsome face that was comparable to a movie star's. He was the teacher of this medical elective course. It was said that his main job was an attending physician in the city's top 3 hospitals. Well, from this, it seemed that this teacher Guan was flawless in terms of personal qualities. Such a young and handsome teacher with no shortcomings, placed in the middle of a group of boys who often carried a bag of breakfast into the classroom, was the best portrayal of a prince charming and a loser. Gu Xingyin searched through Zhang Yu's memory and found out that this teacher was called Guan Hanting. He was privately called the representative of a university's teachers by the girls in the school. He was also known as an abstinent Prince Charming because he did not like to smile, and was not humorous like other young teachers. He never interacted or joked with the students. Gu Xingyin also found out a secret. In other words, Zhang Yu had secretly liked Teacher Guan for a long time. However, Teacher Guan obviously did not care about this. He did not even know Zhang Yu's name. There were too many girls in the school who liked him. There were also many female doctors and nurses who liked him in the hospital. However, Guan Hanting did not like any of them. In other words, he had no interest in the affairs between men and women. Gu Xingyin was lost in thought as she looked at this teacher Guan. In the eyes of others, she was lost in her thoughts as she looked at this handsome man. The deskmate who was talking to her earlier tugged at her again, and whispered in her ear, "Ming Ming, control yourself. I know you have a crush on Teacher Guan. Can you not be so obvious? Be careful not to stand up and answer a third question." Gu Xingyin regained her senses and smiled at the girl beside her. I know, Ruan. Don't worry. The petite and cute girl with long curly hair beside her was called Song Ruan. She was Zhang Yu's classmate in junior high and high school, and they were admitted to a university together. The two of them were best friends who could talk about anything. Fortunately, Guan Hanting didn't ask any more questions until the end of the class, which made all the students in the class feel relieved. Everyone knew that this teacher was cold and merciless. If you didn't know what he was talking about, then you were done for. Be prepared to increase your homework. What? Not doing it? Don't you want your usual attendance scores? Don't blame me if you fail. A university's examinations and exams had always been known to be perverted. These students originally thought that they could finally relax after getting into a university, but after getting into a university with much difficulty, they realized that it was not easy. Fairy tales are all lies. He still memorized books, took notes, reviewed his notes, and checked his attendance on time. Of course, compared to high school, you have the freedom to choose. Choose to work hard or not. In other words, he had to choose whether to fail or not. The bell rang for the end of class. Guan Hanting decisively shut his mouth and said, "Class is over." Without any hesitation, he walked out of the classroom with his courseware. He's simply a handsome man. Song Ruan exclaimed as she cupped her face. Gu Xingyin was speechless. Chapter 1784. Apart from this class, there were no other classes in the afternoon. Gu Xingyin packed her things and headed to the dormitory with Song Ruan. Not far from the school building, the two of them were blocked by a boy. Song Ruan instantly understood when she saw his flushed face. She glanced at Gu Xingyin beside her and said decisively, "I'll wait for you over there." Then, she quickly walked to the small pavilion not far away. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a second before she understood the situation. Speaking of which, Zhang Yu was quite popular in a university. It was not uncommon for boys to confess to her on the streets. "Is there anything I can help you with?" she asked politely. The boy seemed a little nervous. After about half a minute of silence, he seemed to have finally gathered his courage and said to Gu Xingyin in a desperate tone, "Senior Zhang Yu, I like you. Please go out with me." Gu Xingyin was speechless. What a straightforward, simple, and violent boy. Judging from his tone, he was a junior. Gu Xingyin did not say anything. After the boy finished his plan, he lowered his head. After waiting for a long time for Gu Xingyin's reply, he looked up at her in confusion. With this look, he met Gu Xingyin's clear eyes. His face, which had finally cooled down a little, turned red again. Gu Xingyin's heart softened when she saw him like this. He was quite an innocent boy. She thought for a moment and said, "I'm very sorry, Junior." Usually, this was a tactful rejection. A trace of disappointment appeared on the boy's face. However, he was more persistent than Gu Xingyin had imagined. "Senior, may I take the liberty to ask you a question? What kind of boys do you like? I can change. I'm willing to become what you like." The moment she heard this, Gu Xingyin's mind flashed with Guan Hanting's expressionless handsome face. Thus she replied, "I like mature men who are self-disciplined, strict, and don't indulge in life and themselves. They are sentimental." Unexpectedly, just as she finished speaking, the junior suddenly said, "So the rumor that you like Teacher Guan is actually true?" Gu Xingyin. What did she just say? All right, she admitted that she had subconsciously made those requests based on Teacher Guan's conditions. But did everyone really know that she liked Guan Hanting? She was in a daze, but the boy thought that she was shy because he had seen through her thoughts. He clenched his fists tightly and said with a firm gaze, "I won't give up. Senior, just you wait. I will work hard to become a man like Teacher Guan." Without giving Gu Xingyin time to react, he turned and strode away. That back view, no matter how one looked at it, revealed an indomitable posture. Gu Xingyin. She really wanted to reach out her hand and ask the boy to stay. "Young man, what are you thinking? Also, don't hang yourself on me. It's impossible between us." She shook her head and looked at the small pavilion not far away. She was about to walk over to look for Song Ruan. Then he heard clear and steady footsteps coming from behind him. Gu Xingyin turned around instinctively and saw a man in a meticulous black suit with a tie neatly tied. His sleeves were tight, and his hairstyle was perfect. Who else could it be other than Guan Hanting, who was dressed so seriously that he looked like he could attend an international conference at any second? However, this was not what stunned Gu Xingyin. It was because she happened to be at a corner. Here was the question. The conversation between her and the boy just now. Did Teacher Guan hear it? 10 p.m. Finally, she finished writing before 12 p.m. Tomorrow I will continue to update. There are only 2 days left until the end of the month. If you have a monthly vote, please vote for Gigi. Good night. Chapter 1785. Gu Xingyin stood quietly as she watched Guan Hanting walk toward her. Mr. Guan, she called out softly. Guan Hanting stopped in his tracks. He had been called to the office by a teacher to get some documents after class, so he was a little late. Unexpectedly, as soon as she turned the corner, she heard a sentence related to her. So, it turns out that the rumors about you liking Teacher Guan are true. It was not that Guan Hanting was narcissistic, but he was the only teacher with the surname Guan in this school. In order not to embarrass the two, he stopped in his tracks. Then, he accidentally overheard the rest of the conversation. Although Guan Hanting did not hear the conversation between the two, he could still easily guess the content of their conversation. He was not surprised by the boy's words. In fact, Guan Hanting had a clear and straightforward understanding of his own charm. He knew that there were many innocent girls in this school who held a trace of pure and beautiful feelings for him. However, he knew that those feelings had nothing to do with love. They just could not tell the difference between a hazy affection for an outstanding member of the opposite sex and true love. They would understand when they matured mentally. The only thing Guan Hanting could do was refuse. He was not in the mood to develop a trendy teacher-student relationship. Although his main job was not as a teacher, as long as he was still a teacher, he could not go against the professional standards he should have as a teacher. For example, he could develop feelings for his students that were beyond a normal teacher-student relationship. When he heard that someone had left, Guan Hanting looked at the time and walked out. Then he met the girl's clear eyes. So it was her. Guan Hanting still remembered her. She was his student. She had been slacking off in class earlier, but she had been able to answer his difficult question perfectly. He had heard her call him teacher in embarrassment. He thought for a moment and stopped. He nodded slightly at her and said, "Don't you have any classes in the afternoon? The weather forecast said it might rain later. Go back early." He did not mention what he had heard. Gu Xingyin nodded obediently and watched his tall figure slowly disappear into the distance. She walked towards the small pavilion on the other side. Song Wanwan was playing a simple game on her phone. Seeing her, Song Wanwan asked casually, "Done?" Gu Xingyin nodded. Song Wanwan put her phone away decisively and grabbed her hand. "Let's go. Let's go get something to eat first, then." Gu Xingyin smiled as she listened to Song Wanwan's nagging and followed her to the school gate. Not far away, two women who were dressed more maturely walked out of another teaching building. The woman on the left was tall and beautiful. She had exquisite makeup on her face and was carrying a limited edition bag from a certain brand. "Mr. Deng, what are you looking at?" The female teacher beside him asked. Deng Huijun withdrew her gaze and said with a smile, "It's nothing. I just saw a pretty girl." The teacher looked over and said, "That's Zhang Yu. Do you know him?" "Zhang Yu?" Deng Huijun was surprised. The female teacher asked curiously, "What's wrong? Do you know him?" Deng Huijun smiled and shook her head. "I've only heard of the name." Chapter 1786. She said goodbye to the teacher and looked in the direction where Gu Xingyin and the rest left. She was deep in thought. Back home, Deng Huijun saw her mother, Zhao Li, applying a facial mask. Seeing that her daughter was back, Zhao Li looked at the time and tore off the mask. "No classes today?" Deng Huijun nodded and sat next to Zhao Li. "Mom, I saw Zhang Yu today." Zhao Li, who was massaging her face, raised her eyebrows. Zhang Yu? You saw her? Deng Huijun nodded. Her mother had told her about the unfairness of her maternal grandparents since she was young. Deng Huijun had never been to her maternal grandparents' house and had no feelings for the people there. Some time ago, her mother found out that her aunt's daughter, Zhang Yu, was also at a university and asked her to keep an eye on her. It was just that Deng Huijun had been busy with work recently and had not found a chance to interact with her. Zhao Li couldn't care less about her face. She asked, "What does Zhang Yu look like?" Deng Huijun thought for a while and said, "I didn't see her clearly. I only looked at her from afar. She is very beautiful." Zhao Li snorted and said in a strange tone, "Our Zhao family has always been outstanding. My sister has been a beauty since she was young. It would be strange if her daughter was not beautiful." She looked at her daughter's beautiful eyes and felt proud. She said, "But my Huijun is the most beautiful. No matter how beautiful Zhang Yu is, can she compare to my Huijun?" This beautiful and outstanding daughter had always been Zhao Li's pride. Deng Huijun was silent for a while. She did not tell her mother that Zhang Yu was actually very good-looking and was not inferior to her. If she told her mother, she would probably get angry again. It was better not to tell her. At this time, Zhao Li spoke again. "Are you done with your work? Anyway, you are a teacher at a university. You should interact with Zhang Yu during this time. I want to see what kind of outstanding daughter my good sister has raised." Deng Huijun nodded. She was also very curious about the legendary cousin. Looking at the time, she asked, "Where is Dad?" "Not back yet." Hearing her husband's name, Zhao Li's face sank. She said coldly, "Go back? I think he has long forgotten about this family. I don't know which vixen's house he's at." Deng Yuanlin was a playboy when he was young. Now that he was older, he didn't restrain himself at all. Zhao Li knew that over the years, the number of women he had outside was in the double digits. As for those who didn't know, it was needless to say. But what could she do? In the beginning, Deng Yuanlin would still apologize to her nicely and buy things to coax her. In the end, he was annoyed and left after saying coldly, "Why are you making a fuss? When you were with me, didn't you know that I was such a man? If you don't want to live with me anymore, we'll get a divorce." His heartless words made Zhao Li's heart turn cold. That's right. When I was with Deng Yuanlin, didn't I already know that he liked to steal food? Otherwise, how did she, Zhao Li, manage to squeeze out the first wife and succeed? How could she, Zhao Li, keep the man that other women couldn't? What was even more ironic was that the woman she looked down on had the courage to divorce Deng Yuanlin. But she, Zhao Li, did not even dare to divorce him. Chapter 1787. It was because she couldn't bear to give up the glorious title of Mrs. Deng. It was also because she knew how cold-blooded her husband, Deng Yuanlin, was. If she divorced, she would never be able to get the property that she deserved as Deng Yuanlin's legal wife. Of course, she didn't want a divorce. Even if she was unhappy, at least she could enjoy the envious gazes of countless people when she was outside. Being able to satisfy her vanity outside was enough. Deng Huijun was a little unhappy when she heard her mother's words. She felt that it was very ungraceful of her mother to say such words. Moreover, she had always hated her mother for failing to live up to her expectations. She was her father's legal wife. Why did she allow her father to cheat on her for so many years? Deng Huijun, who had been raised as a princess since she was a child, did not know about her mother's past glorious deeds. She had always been proud of her identity as the Deng family's princess. She never knew that she was actually just an illegitimate daughter in the first few years of her life. After all, she was her mother. Deng Huijun could only hide this dissatisfaction in her heart. Zhao Li didn't know that her daughter was hiding such dissatisfaction in her heart. Her mind quickly returned to Zhang Yu. She had long been used to her husband's fickleness. Zhang Yu's matter was the most important at the moment. Then it's settled. You go and carefully find out what kind of person Zhang Yu is in private. It's best if she's not very clean. When the time comes, find a way to expose it. I'd like to see how wonderful the expressions on my parents' faces will be when they find out what kind of virtue their favorite granddaughter has. Deng Huijun was also looking forward to it. She had been influenced by what she saw and heard since she was a child. She had always held an unclear resentment towards her aunt and her cousin who was rumored to be very doted on. This time, if she could really get hold of something that could be used against her. Gu Xingyin lay on the bed and listened to the conversation between the mother and daughter with headphones plugged in. What a vulgar and vicious woman. She sighed in her heart and suddenly couldn't help but pity Deng Huijun. It was actually quite a sad thing to be raised by a mother who was full of negative energy and become like this when she grew up. However, this kind of sadness was not a reason to frame others at will. The next day, coincidentally, it was also an elective course related to cold court. The medical courses that Guan Hanting taught at University A were actually very boring. However, due to his good looks and ascetic temperament, this course was one of the most popular electives in the entire school. Of course, 70% of the students in the class were girls. The other 30% were otakus who didn't know anything and just randomly picked a class when they were choosing classes. Every Tuesday and Wednesday, the first class in the afternoon was Guan Hanting's class. Gu Xingyin and Song Ruanruan sat together in the classroom. Today, the two of them came rather late. The consequence of being late was that the seats in the middle of the classroom were all occupied. Only the golden seats, in the first two rows in the middle, were left. This location had always been a black zone that students avoided like the plague. Everyone knew the reason. Song Ruanruan was practically wailing as she followed Gu Xingyin to the second row. She even invited someone to a competition. They were going to be screwed this time. Guan Hanting entered the classroom on time as the bell rang. Chapter 1788. As soon as he entered the classroom, he saw the two girls sitting right below the podium. Let's start the roll call. He picked up the roll call list in his hand and said calmly, Zhang Huanhuan. Here. Chen Yuan. Here. Zhang Yu. Guan Hanting heard the girl in front of him open her mouth and answer clearly, here. So her name is Zhang Yu. Octopus? He circled the name in his mind and laughed inwardly at how interesting the names of her parents were. Next, the class began. Occasionally, Guan Hanting glanced over and could clearly see the girl supporting her chin with her hand. She seemed to be in a daze. He thought to himself that every time he saw her, she seemed to be in a daze. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but think of the conversation he heard yesterday. Did she really like him? Did she like him so much that she would be in a daze when listening to his class? Zhang Yu. Guan Hanting casually asked two questions. After glancing at the roll call list, he subconsciously called out this name. As soon as he said this, he was slightly stunned. Then he saw that the girl was also stunned for a moment. She didn't seem to expect that it would be her turn to answer a question. She blinked her big eyes and stood up. She seemed to be in a daze for a moment. Then she clearly answered his questions. Guan Hanting was convinced by her ability to answer questions perfectly even when she was in a daze. Okay, sit down. Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. She was just in a daze a few times out of habit. How could it be so coincidental that she would be called out to every time? She began to sit properly and listen to the class attentively. She seemed to have been marked in this teacher's mind. She had to act quickly to wash away her image in his mind. During the entire class, Gu Xingyin found that Mr. Guan's eyes stopped on her at least 10 times. She thought to herself, that was close. He really did remember me. In fact, Gu Xingyin was overthinking it. Guan Hanting himself was a little puzzled. He didn't know why his eyes couldn't help but fall on the girl below the podium. Then every time his eyes met hers, a strange sense of satisfaction rose in his heart. He felt that his condition was a little off. The class was finally over. Guan Hanting said, "Class is over." He lowered his head to sort out his materials and prepared to leave. When he turned around, he clearly heard the girl beside Gu Xingyin call her Meng Meng. Meng Meng? Was it a nickname? Guan Hanting muttered in his heart as he glanced at Gu Xingyin's appearance. He had to admit that this name suited her better. Gu Xingyin suddenly received a glance from the podium. She was somewhat baffled. What's wrong? However, Guan Hanting would not answer her. By the time Gu Xingyin regained her senses, Guan Hanting had already left the classroom. I can't play with my phone, stare blankly, or sleep for 2 whole periods. I'm so bored. Song Ruan was still complaining. Next time, we have to come earlier. Gu Xingyin replied absent-mindedly. The two of them walked towards the dormitory. As soon as they walked out of the school building, they saw Guan Hanting standing under a tree not far away. Next to Guan Hanting was a woman in a cream-colored dress. The woman was tall and slender. She was also very beautiful. When she stood next to Guan Hanting, they looked like a perfect match. 4 chapters. The remaining 6 chapters will be updated at night. This month's monthly votes are in the top 3 categories. Love you, love you, love you. Important things need to be said 3 times. See you later. That you're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.